It's been a minute, man. A lot of talk about since the last time I had the homie on. We got G Bush. G Bush got the maroon and gold, man. You look like a John Adams man. You know, you repping Adams, you
No,
know?
no, no. I'm repping the Cavs. I'm repping the Cavs. I'm going to the
Oh,
Cavs game
okay, the
tonight.
wine and gold. Okay, I
Yeah,
see, I see, I see
I'm
it.
going to the Cavs game tonight. My wife got me she got me some
Okay.
tickets for my birthday, and
Hey,
her birthday is on the
W wife.
18th, and we gonna go down and watch these Cavs dust off the Pelicans real quick. Shout out to you and your Cavs content.
But appreciate you, man. And if you do like Cavs content, you're looking for somewhere to go, I'm doing the Cavs thing down there, daily videos. You know how it is. You know, I must like working. Like, I must like working or something like that. But G, we got a lot to get into with the not the Cavs, the Browns.
Mhm.
Um, I find this season to be interesting, and it illustrates one of my main points every year I go into a season. We talk about these win-loss records. We talk about our expectations. And I always make the point, and it's one of the hardest points to actually follow through on yourself, which is, man, what your expectation is before the season does not matter. Not because it won't be true or will be true, but how you get to wherever you get to. It matters. Like, it changes things, right? And before the season, I was like, yeah, if this season goes wrong, let's say Deshaun he falls off a cliff, which you can argue happened.
Oh, that happened unequivocally.
Yeah.
That's
And
there.
like he's coming off of Achilles, so now you got to move on from that whole situation, right? So let's say that happens. In my mind, I'm thinking this before the season. I was still under the impression, I'm like, well, Kevin just signed that deal. Andrew signed that deal. It would take a lot for them to be on the hot seat. Brother, we're 11 weeks into the season, and I'm not sure if either of them going to make it through.
The acceleration process is real. I think what we're reminded every single year is that the games truly, 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 really overshadow
Matter.
anything because
Yeah.
we're used to talking about the games and talking about the other things outside of the games for all year. Like the league is a 24-hour news cycle. Like we go from mini camps to draft to free agency to all of these different things that we go through, and we forget just how important the games are during the regular season, and we forget how impactful they are, and then we actually forget how long the season is. When Deshaun Watson got hurt, I said one of the worst things for the Cleveland Browns that hurt them was the fact that Deshaun Watson got hurt not because he was playing good football, it's because you no longer had that thing to focus on and say, how bad is this? This contract is the worst contract. This guy is bad. He's falling off. Listen, this is crazy. When you take him off the board and you do it so early, there's nothing else to focus on. And people now are focusing in real time on, man, this team, look, is the talent level like we thought it was? Man, this team looked like it kind of gave up against the Saints. Man, what about this O-line? Did we get old overnight? You just start looking around at stuff, Q. It's like you go to somebody else's house and you go pull up on Quincy's little flat and you're like, dog, man, I like what he did with his man cave right there. But you start looking at your stuff a little different, don't you? You start being like, I might want to go ahead and switch my little decor up at the house because this is different. And when the Pittsburgh Steelers, who people forget, had the worst contract before the Deshaun Watson deal, they were talking about Russell Wilson as one of the worst contracts, one of the worst deals, one of the worst things. And the Broncos had to get rid of him. Flip it now. You go into this game, Quincy, they're 8-2 and you're 2-8.
They're having the exact season you thought you would have. Like that's the thing I think. I like to think that I have demonstrated over the years a decent understanding of how the people at the top of this organization, what triggers them, what doesn't. And one of the things that I think people aren't thinking about, like when they're like, oh no, everybody's going to be safe, right? Is the fact that Pittsburgh is having the season that you thought you would have. and you are not having the season you thought you would have. And now these two things are on a collision course. And if this thing goes bad, we'll see how it goes, because I'm going to release this video on Thursday. So we'll see how it goes tonight, right? If the Browns are able to pull it off, then I think, I think they'll end up closer to being fine. But if they lose in a way that's not even competitive, then that's going to be something that sits, because the one thing Jimmy hates feeling is if he's not competitive with the Steelers, right? Like, he wants to, at the very least, be competitive with the Steelers. The thing that's kept Kevin Stefanski around and got him an extension, in part, he's been competitive with the Steelers.
Yes.
Has not, I think he's lost one home game versus Pittsburgh, one in Pittsburgh, wasn't there on the sideline, but put together the game plan, everything else for the playoff game, right? Like, during this era, you have not been dominated by Pittsburgh. If you make Jimmy feel like it's 2015 again, he going to start making some 2015 decisions, right? Because the thing about Jimmy, and I'm no defender of any owner in the NFL, right? But my lack of faith in any ownership in the NFL, it kind of makes me be on the more positive side with Jimmy, because everybody's like, oh, you have a bad owner. I don't think bad ownership exists.
Explain that to me, because I have a problem with a certain rationale. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think bad ownership exists, because I think every single owner is bad. So there's no such thing as good ownership, right? Like, the concept of bad ownership means that good ownership is a thing. And the fact of the matter is, no owner is qualified from a football standpoint. Maybe Jerry Jones, out of all of them. Maybe Jerry Jones, and you can argue he's tearing the Dallas Cowboys apart, right? No owner is qualified to have the power that they have, other than the fact that they pay for it.
Yeah.
Right? So whenever an owner is making a decision in any football organization, that's the least qualified person in that decision-making circle making a decision. That's not good for any team if your owner is making a ton of decisions.
And think about it. The most important decisions, Q, usually come from, all right, if we drafted a quarterback, who has the last say? Owner.
Usually ownership's got to give you the okay for it, right?
If you want to overpay for a free agent, generally speaking, the owner is the yes or no guy in the room. And I don't know what this irks me a little bit when people say, until we get rid of Jimmy Haslam as a coach, we'll never be anything until we get rid of. I say, listen, I don't know how you think this thing works, people, but how do we circumvent some of the same things that happen in every single one of these 32 organizations with coaches and not having as much power as the owner? Figure that out. I'm saying to you, the reason why it goes so left with Pittsburgh is this. He was once part of that organization. Pittsburgh is your rival. And when you get embarrassed at the family reunion, all bets are off when you get back to the house. You're like, we all have parents that have told us, do not embarrass me in front of company. And the Browns routinely embarrass you in front of company against Pittsburgh.
And I think also another thing to think about too, when it comes to like ownership and how people are like, well, we got to change ownership, this and that. You change ownership, it's not really going to change anything, right? The only thing that could save you from ownership making decisions is if you get somebody in the building ownership trust who's qualified to make those decisions.
Right.
That's what separates the good organizations from the bad ones, is that they have years of trust built in to their top end that ownership doesn't feel the need to meddle, right? Like, that's what it, like, if me and you open a restaurant, G, and maybe we could cook a little bit, right? But we trying to open up a seafood boil restaurant, right? And like, my seafood boil ain't bad, but it's not famous, right? So like,
you got the regular vegetables. You ain't got nothing exotic. It's just carrots and potatoes. and some
I'm not about to
crawfish.
make a living off my seafood boil, right? But let's say me and you wanted to run a restaurant, right? We would have to hire somebody that we trust to put together the food in that restaurant.
Yes.
What we don't want to be doing, right? Like what would make that restaurant have a much, much worse chance of success is if we out here trying to like figure out how much salt should be in it, right? Like, and we ain't really the cooks like that. Like, we just some dudes with some money that wanted to get a restaurant together, right? Like that at the end of the day. And if we're out here trying to figure out how much salt to put in because we don't have a head chef that we trust, we're doomed to fail.
Right.
The question with the Cleveland Browns is, do they feel like they have those people in place that it's a rough year, you can trust them, whatever it is, so you don't have to have Jimmy get back up in here and making decisions? Because the reality is, for the last 4 years, Jimmy has trusted these people, right? And it's gone good season, bad season, good season, bad season.
Do you think, let me ask you this question, because I asked everybody, I be on UCSS, and they be ducking me. They be ducking the conversation. Who do you believe made the final decision on moving on from Baker Mayfield? Because
I think they all three did.
So you feel like all three of them came to that conclusion, right?
I think Deshaun was, I mean, like if we go back to 2022, right? Because we can't look at this with like how Deshaun looks now.
Right.
And it makes sense. But you go back to 2022, Deshaun was seen as on par with Pat Mahomes,
yes,
or Joe Burrow, right? Like it was just like going for Deshaun Watson was as equivalent as like trading 3 first-round picks for Caleb Williams or somebody better, because this dude had already had top 5 passing seasons in the NFL. So I think after the year that they had in 2021, where it felt like quarterback play, and I think a lot of people forget the defense wasn't that great either.
No.
Well, no, actually 2021 the defense was decent. My bad. 2022 the defense was trash. 2021 was the 1 year where we got fooled on this whole Joe Woods thing. We were like, oh, it might work.
Yeah.
But 2022 was absolute garbage from Joe Woods. So you were thinking, okay, quarterback play tanked you. You got a lot of young players. You don't really have the time or the draft position to draft somebody. And you know that Baker Mayfield, and look, I got news for the Baker Mayfield people. He was never going to be a Cleveland Brown past 2022, right? When his contract ended, they were never going to extend him. Like, so, I know people are like
that. So that when you, so for me, if I'm looking at it from Jimmy Havin's perspective, I say, listen, we had the first overall pick. I feel like when you didn't take Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson,
and that was John Dorsey, right?
That was Dorsey. So he's like, we didn't make that pick correctly at that time. To salvage those draft picks and to salvage that rebuild, you had to go back into the draft or go back somewhere and try to find a quarterback that can maximize what other talent you had, right?
So to me, I don't really blame anybody for the trade itself, or if you're in the organization, I find it hard to sit here. It would be super revisionist for everybody to be like, well, you wanted him, and this is how, because nobody thought Deshaun Watson would be this bad. Even the biggest haters of the move at the time thought it was cynical. They did not think it would be an unsuccessful move, right? Like even the people who hated the move were like, yeah, they'll win games, but at what cost?
Well, elections have consequences. So the consequences of Deshaun Watson, where does that fall, and how do you make the decision on who?
Here's how I kind of think about it, right? Because Deshaun Watson is the X factor and who's going to keep their job and who's not. Here's how I think about it. The trade itself, I think all three of them were in on it. I think it made sense for all three of them to be in on it. Like this idea that it was just Jimmy or just Andrew or just Kevin, it doesn't make sense to me. I think Kevin thought it was a good idea. I think Andrew thought it was a good idea, and they convinced Jimmy that it was a good idea. I honestly think Jimmy was probably the last person to be convinced. Okay. Because Jimmy did like Baker Mayfield and like what Baker Mayfield brought to the table, but I think eventually he got pushed over the limit with Baker and said, you know what, let's go get somebody.
Okay.
Right. And then maybe once Jimmy got pushed there, he was a little bit more gung-ho about it than anybody else. But I don't think anybody was thinking at the time, let's pump the brakes on this.
Yeah.
Right. So we get to this year. I think up until that point, trade works out, trade doesn't work out, is fine. My question is this. After the Commanders game, where it was obvious that there was no salvaging this, right? Because I think that was the game where everybody looked at and was like, it's done. Like, there's no fixing this. I remember talking to you after that game. I think that's the last time we talked, and we were both like, yeah, it's done. And me and you have been two people who have been willing to be fair to Deshaun during this whole thing. That was the one that I was like, yeah, it's over with.
Yeah,
right.
Look,
that was the one that
some would even say G. Bush was putting a cape on for Deshaun Watson. But when I came out afterwards and was like, nah, bro, if y'all sit him down now. And then people were super confused. Like, even G. Bush rolled out.
Because that's how bad the game was. It was like, hey, bro, this ain't going to happen. It doesn't matter who's offensive coordinator or whatever, what offense you run. He's not executing basic stuff in the NFL against open coverage, right? So once you got to that point, the question I want to know the answer to is, who kept pushing for this to keep going? Right?
Okay.
Was that ownership? If that's ownership, then it's hard for me to hold Kevin and Andrew solely accountable for the record, because ownership did extend this thing that, I mean, Jameis Winston's about to surpass him in yards in probably the first half of Thursday night's game, right? Like, that's hard for me to hold Kevin accountable for that record, in the same way that I would hold any other coach accountable for going under 300 because of the whole Deshaun thing. Now, if it was Kevin that said, no, we got to work with him, he on his own, right? Like, if it was Andrew and Kevin that made that decision, they're on their own, because now you made the decision to keep him going. That led to this win-loss record being what it is. You're going to get fired if you're under 300. If you're anybody, Bill Belichick got fired under 300. Andy Reid got fired for going under 300, right? Like, and Bill Belichick got fired for going under 300 after he won all them Super Bowls. So you can't go under 300 unless you have an extenuating circumstance. My thought is Deshaun Watson, like, were they responsible for this thing going on past week 5? Right?
I think,
like, if that's the coaching staff that was like, hey, let's do this, and the football ops is like, hey, let's keep doing this. Okay, but if it wasn't football ops, then I think they do get a little bit of a pass.
And well, let me muddy the waters. I'll go on a limb and say, I think maybe Jimmy Haslam actually told him, "Nah, you're gonna play him. Nah, I'm gonna get my money's worth. And if he's gonna be on the roster, because trust me, he goes back to, he probably done already went to the financial department and say, okay, listen. So what if we wanted to cut him, Jimmy? That's not gonna happen, Jimmy. It's 85.
Or there's a chance that Jimmy said, if we're gonna move on, I want to be 100% sure,
right,
that we have to move on, right? Because at that time too, we have to remember he was watching Baker Mayfield, and this is when Baker Mayfield was playing well, not at like 4-6, right? But this is when Baker Mayfield was playing well. So, like, I think this is my headcanon. Me and G. Bush are speculating. We are not reporting anything. We don't know. Okay, like we just speculating. So take it with a grain of salt, right? My thought is similar to yours, where they got to that point. I think it's possible that they might have gotten to that point before the Commanders game, right? Like, I think it's possible they got there after the New York game, in my mind. And they might have wanted to make a move, but Jimmy was like, hey, look at what's going on with Baker Mayfield right now. Because at the time, Baker was like at that time, he was an MVP candidate. He's no longer that right now, but because he threw like 12 interceptions in a month.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, hey, Bake gonna bake both ways, baby. Like that's the thing I like about Baker. He's consistently inconsistent. Like that's the thing. Bake gonna give you like Bake a hoop, but Bake the Karis LeVert of quarterbacks, man. Like, and right. I think there should be a place for them, right?
The Karis LeVert of quarterbacks. Look, Jimmy definitely listen, and I've heard, and I'm not gonna say who told me this, but I've heard that the staff was on board early, like 3 games, and was like, this not going to work. Let me show you why it ain't going to work. And they like this. That guy's open. He's open. Why are you running from a clean pocket? What is this? We don't even teach this. They're holding the rock. And they were like, no, we're going to pump the brakes on this because once upon a time, you guys all said that Baker Mayfield wasn't no good. And it turns out he looks like an MVP candidate. So I think that's I'm along those lines, exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But here's the crazy part about we bring it back full circle, like you said. But then it matters what the games look like after Deshaun Watson gets hurt. And it doesn't help the fact that even though Jameis Winston threw for 400 yards and no picks, and you got beat 35-14. Now things like the defense are creeping this ugly. Special teams are abysmal. Now it's looking like guys are not really enthusiastic. When those things start trickling down, people start to forget about Deshaun Watson. In football terms, that was ages ago. We haven't seen, heard, or said anything to Deshaun Watson here. Yet it had to buy. Pretty soon, they'll forget that Deshaun Watson was that bad, and it'll just be on what you're putting on the field.
Now, here's where I think it could differ, right? It might have been they wanted to bench him. Jimmy was like, I want to be sure if we're going to move on from Watson. And part of that was like, hey, if we have to sacrifice the season, I'd rather be sure than get the most out of this year once they were at like 1-5.
Yeah.
Right. And once that determination is made from the owner, you are basically saying whatever happens for the rest of the year. Now, things change. I think that was the road that they were going on. Then Deshaun got injured. And Jameis got injured. They beat Baltimore. So now the expectations are raised a little bit. Now, the Chargers game, I will contend, I think people were a bit harder on that Chargers game than we should have been in retrospect. The Chargers are a very good football team. Like, we simply aren't there.
They got good defense.
There. Yeah, like they're a really good football team. If the Kansas City Chiefs weren't one-loss team, they'd probably be in the lead for their division right now. And they're playing some of their best football right now. And we ran into it. Okay, cool. Now the Saints, they not the Chargers, right? And the question that I find interesting is everybody assumes that Ken Dorsey's going to be the one gone. But if I look at the work over the last 3 weeks, Ken Dorsey got the least to answer right now. Because they were moving the ball against the Chargers. Jameis just threw a bunch of interceptions. They were moving the ball against the Ravens. They were moving the ball against them. You know what failed the Browns? Special teams. Like
special team
more than once.
Boy, I tell you what. Bubba Ventura.
Yeah, now, and
that's a whole nother story.
The question is like, how many coordinator hires does Kevin get? Like that's a big question, right? Because I don't think you fired Jim Schwartz. I think the issue with the defense, we just gotta call it what it is, man. They 2-8. Like we just gotta call it what it is. They 2-8, and when you 2-8, the defense gonna look like this sometimes. Like it don't matter how talented you are, because a lot of defense is just will to win an effort. And when you 2-8, even if you're Ray Lewis and you got the will to win every day, let me tell you something. That effort not gonna be the same. You done been out there when you don't feel like y'all got a great chance to win.
I was 1-11. I was 1-11. I was 1-11, bro. We went 1-11 one year. What are you talking about? Like you out there,
you gonna let somebody slip through the gaps,
man?
Couple times, like got washed. Like
listen, here's. But, you know, this is so funny how we dissect this, because the argument just as good or bad as the argument is for Kevin Stefanski losing his job or keeping his job, that is there also for Andrew Berry.
Yeah.
It's you can make the same comments. You're like, you start looking at some of these picks and you're like, man, the Jed Wills thing don't hurt. That don't help you, bro. The
thing with Andrew Berry, though, that I think he gets saved on is every year he didn't quite hit a home run in the first round. Boy, he smacked it out the park in the second round.
The later picks, like his like
because the Jed Wills year, right? Yeah, you don't hit on Jed, but you know who you did hit on? Grant Delpit. Yeah. Already got his extension. The next year's draft, right? JOK in the second round. Greg Newsom's right? He's not going to replace Denzel Ward or anything, but he's It's what, a late round, first round pick. That's like a pretty C+ pick right there, right? Like a C-, C+, like C average.
Yeah, he's like you go back and look at
you could draft worse corners than him, but you can't draft. You could definitely draft better corners than him, right? Like it's a wash there, right? And then those are only 2 first round picks that he had. He gets Martin Emerson, DeJuan Jones, like.
He made up with Martin Emerson where he some people would say is a miss with Newsom. Yeah, like you're like, okay, well, he got a 3rd or 4th round pick.
And then who knows? DeJuan might wash out the miss with Jed Wills.
Might,
right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So,
but them receivers though.
I mean, like, hey, Cedric Tillman hooping. Like
he's saving his life. He's saving him, but the Schwartz and the David Bells of the world.
Yeah. Woo. They took some bad swings at wide receiver for sure. They've also, like, that's the thing. It's so, I give Andrew Berry like a C+ grade when you look at like the talent evaluation, because it's like it's 50-50 with like slight lean on good. It depends on if you blame the Watson trade on him. I think that's an organizational decision. I don't think that's solely on Andrew Berry. It's too big of a move to just put on the general manager. He didn't go out on a limb and do it himself, right? But for every bad draft pick, Anthony Schwartz, David Bell, you get Amari Cooper for a 5th round pick and then trade him for a 3rd and then have Cedric Tillman step up. And then 2 weeks later, Jerry Jeudy getting like 160 in a game, right? So it's a lot of give and take, because, like, yeah, he didn't draft well here, but then he made a really good trade. And, like, the Jerry Jeudy trade seems like that's going to be a pretty fair one at the very least, if not a good trade that you made. Cedric Tillman, I think he's at least going to be like an 800-yard wide receiver, right? Like, he's going to be useful on the NFL team. I don't know if he's going to be number 1 wide receiver, but for a 3rd round pick, you would expect him to be that.
You keep talking. The more, this is why the games count. It's almost coming full circle. It's like it matters. Like they've done enough good stuff to justify keeping their jobs. They've done some bad things that if things keep snowballing and it don't look good, they can lose their jobs. Like
is not like we're used to Cleveland when it's time to go. It's obvious, right? This is one of them things where this is not an obvious pull the plug situation on these two, right? Like, you can say to yourself, it's a bad year. This has been coming. They've had 2 down seasons out of this. 3 out of 5 have been down. And you could justify firing him, but you can also justify not firing him. This isn't like Mike Pettin in 2015 or Hugh Jackson in the middle of the season last year where there's no justifying keeping him. This is going to be probably one of the tougher decisions if they have not already made this decision internally, right? Because it's a chance that they might have said, hey, we're going to stick with this. Like, we good. And this gonna be a pivot point for this franchise. And I don't know which pivot is going to be good, whether they move on or not, because this is not obvious. Like, firing Kevin Stefanski, like, as much as some people want to make it feel obvious, it's not obvious. It's something that could happen for sure, and it's definitely on the table. I don't feel like it's an obvious decision that it's going to be a good one for you if you fire him.
Can we ask
Same
this?
with Andrew Berry.
Can we ask this? I just happened to run across one of your blogs. Mr. Steal Your Job is in the building.
Oh my God.
Now, if It's easier always to get a job if you already got a job. It's
Absolutely.
easier to always move on from a relationship you might not be happy in if somebody's waiting in the wings, being like, "Hey, I'm a little younger.
Yeah.
I'm a
The
little
grass always look green, but
grass
then
always look
who
greener.
knows? 2 albums later, you might be like Boys to Men, be like, damn. Right?
Well, we want the mid '90s boys.
I want that old thing back.
I want the old.
Right?
Listen, it is Mike Vrabel, because we talk about it like all the time. Is he, in your opinion, an upgrade? Because
I think it's a very lateral move.
Okay, because like, I wanted to get you on record, because a lot of people acting like, like that's Vince Lombardi in the wings. Like, is well, this like it? What type of upgrade do you feel like this is it, or is it out of lateral move? Because that makes a lot of sense. If you feel like it's a lateral move, you might want to stick with Stefanski.
I think Mike too would be the only move that would make things kind of easier on Jimmy if he could go there, because the thing is, the rhetoric is the only thing that changes with Mike Vrabel. Like, if you bring in Mike Vrabel, Jim Schwartz is probably still going to be your defense coordinator.
Yep.
Right? And you know what kind of offense you're going to run? The same offense Kevin was running.
Do you think they keep Dorsey?
No. You don't keep Dorsey, but like, look at his offensive coordinators while he was in Tennessee. Matt LaFleur, Arthur Smith. Those are West Coast Kubiak, Shanahan guys. He likes running that kind of offense. You would basically be running the Kevin Stefanski offense still, right? You would be changing some words around there, but like, it's not going to be super different than what they've done in the past. Mike Vrabel is a defensive head coach. He's trying to run that ball and do a bunch of play action, right? So Mike Vrabel would be interesting because I think a lot of people would be excited for it at first, but I don't know how many of these people who would be excited don't understand that Mike Vrabel is probably going to do the same exact stuff that Kevin was doing, right?
Except I will say that I don't think he will do this. I don't think Mike Vrabel's camps will be, I don't think he'd tell people to hang out during training camp. Like, I don't think they'd be going to the Greenbrier. I think sometimes.
Well, the Greenbrier's a Deshaun thing, right?
Yeah. I think
that came over with Deshaun.
I think rhetoric to a certain extent does count a little bit, right? Like, the changing of the messaging. One thing I give credit for the Steelers, and they talk about this, is Steelers they could be having Friday practices, and before you get there, whether you get drafted there or whether you get a free agency, they let them know. Oh, no. Why y'all, the rest of the dudes, we practice on Fridays. We got pads on Fridays. It is what it is. And it's just, that's what it is. And so there's a level of toughness that's built into your culture and your organization. And I think that slipped a little bit. Some would argue they haven't had that, but I think it has slipped a little bit with the Browns, and maybe that's a change that you may need. That's one of the things on the margin that make a difference. I don't know.
To me, it's hard to tell if that's even the case, right? Because I think we kind of project that onto Kevin because he doesn't project that out. But if you look at like the team last year, they didn't seem to lack any toughness to me, right? Like, seemed to be a very tough football team.
They were even resilient.
Very resilient, like the most resilient team in football all of last year. And that was a Kevin Stefanski team, right? So I don't know how much of that, like, Kevin is incapable of replicating or not, because we've seen Kevin do it the same way we've seen Mike Vrabel do it, right? My whole point is that is what you're changing, right? You're changing the rhetoric and the vibe of what you're doing, but you're not actually changing the nuts and bolts of what you're doing. And I think some people will be under the impression that like Mike Vrabel's going to come in here and do something completely different. It's not going to be, let me tear it down. And this is why I think Mike Vrabel would be the most attractive option if they did want to move on from Kevin for whatever reason, for everybody in that building, because it would not be a let's tear it down move. It would be a, okay, we think Kevin's message has fallen on deaf ears. We're going to change the messenger type move, right?
I think what he does, and I don't know if you vibe with this, the problem that I got with this season is, and we are supposed to be over this stuff. We're supposed to be over the 2-8. Like,
yeah,
like maybe Mike Vrabel changes it from, hey, we might have some people hurt, but we sure as hell ain't going 2-8. We'll give you 7 wins. Like, give me a bad 7-win season. Like, at least I can say that you're going to have a floor to this thing where we ain't doing peaks and valleys. Like, I don't want to have Super Bowl aspirations and win with all these quarterbacks, win 12 games, go to the playoffs. But then the next year, we back down to 3 wins and we questioning what happened. Like, I want, and people say it's the worst place you could be with the Pittsburgh Steelers is medium, or the worst place you could be is going to the playoffs like the Ravens every year, not going deep. No, I call that competent football. What we are doing is hyperbole. I don't want that. I want consistent. You know what you're going to get from the Cleveland Browns. They're not going to be a dumpster fire every other year. That's maybe he can bring that.
Yeah, and I think this is the thing that you look for with the head coach, right? I think far too often we get too caught up with a head coach's peak season, right? Oh, this coach got to a Super Bowl or he won a Super Bowl. I've seen Zach Taylor get to a Super Bowl, come within one play of winning it. I don't think Zach Taylor's a great coach. I don't think your coach dictates your ceiling in the NFL. What I do think your coach has a lot to say on is your floor, right? Like, you look at a great coach versus a coach who had a hot year.
Yeah.
It's that floor, right? It's kind of like when we talk about somebody who's a great artist versus somebody who had a hot album.
Like Frank Reich, like yeah. Frank Reich. He was a hot guy for a long time. Like, and like what did he get? He was with the Panthers, or where was that?
With the Colts.
Colts, right?
Yeah. And then people were like, oh, this is the hottest guy in the league and everything else. And then he got fired a couple years after that, right? Like, you could have a couple hot seasons. That doesn't mean you're a great coach. To me, how I measure a great coach is a floor that's maintained over time. Mike Tomlin, to me, best coach in the NFL. What's he famous for? He doesn't go under 500. Now, everybody not going to be Mike Tomlin, right? Mm-hmm. But your coach does have to provide a floor. Like, that's what having a good coach does. It provides you a floor. In college, it does that. In the NFL, it does that. That's what a good coach provides you. And I think that's what Kevin needs to prove for the rest of the season, that he could provide a floor. Now, where I've kind of like, and if you ask me right now, should Kevin be fired? I don't know the answer to that question. Like,
yeah,
I don't know where I sit on that yet.
I think you gotta. I'm watching game to game.
Yeah, but I think what Kevin should be able to demonstrate, if he is who we think he is he should be able to provide some type of floor for this team, right? That they're not going to bottom out, despite what it looks like right now. Like, because if you look at the schedule, I wouldn't blame you for feeling like the Browns are about to bottom out, right? And win 2 games for the rest of the season.
But if he get 4 games, it's a different story, though.
Yeah, but if he gets a couple of games, like if we wins 4 out of the next 7, that gets you above 300. Next thing you know, he's safe as anybody, because he could point to, I went 5-5 with Jameis. We beat the Chiefs or somebody like that, right? Like, we really need to see Kevin from now on be able to demonstrate that he can get this team to a place floor wise. Now, that's going to be difficult to do when he's not calling the plays, which I was shocked why. That's why I was like, I don't know why you would want to let go of that at a time like this, but maybe he thinks that's better for the team. Who knows? We'll see what happens going forward. But you need to see him. And look, I understand the level of competition you're playing is going to make it really hard to go 4 out of the last 7 games, right? Like, it is what it is there. But you do want to see them be very competitive for the rest of the year in these games.
If they're competitive and they just say, and this is crazy, say they're competitive and they do only win 2 more games. Mm-hmm. If some of those games, if you win 2 of those games and one of those games is Baltimore on the road and the Chiefs, you can sell that.
Yeah. Like, I think the issue that people have, like, I don't think people would be as bothered by this loss versus the Saints if you lost it because Dustin Hopkins missed a field goal.
Yeah.
Nobody's asking Kevin to be fired because of that, because it's like, okay, well, you should have won that game. Right. But special teams take the people were asking Dustin Hopkins to go or
Bubba
Ventrone to go, but you allowed Taysom Hill, like the defense allowed Taysom Hill to get like 3 touchdowns in that game. That's not crazy. Really 100% on Kevin, right? Like that's not something you could 100% blame on him, but it's bottoming out that people just get the ick from, right? And I think that's what needs to be provided, because if you could provide that floor, you have a really good coach. And to Kevin's credit, he's had 2 seasons. I know people use these 2 seasons against him, but like, look at them 2 seasons. He did not win 11 games so far in his career. Look at what happened in them 2 seasons. Like, Baker Mayfield decided that he was not going to sit in a season where he had one arm and you had to deal with that at quarterback the whole year. They got to what? 7-8 wins that season? That's providing a floor for your football team, right? In 2022, Deshaun got suspended for 11. The other 6 games, he's clearly coming back from a 700-day hiatus. Still found a way to get to a reasonable record in those seasons.
And if you can pull some of these last games, that's why the games matter. I mean,
and that's why I'm
by the way, we're having a different conversation. If the Browns win against the Steelers and they're 8-2, we're having a completely different conversation next week, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that matters if they win against the Steelers, because 1, we're going to be able to sit on it for like 10 days. And 2, what else I think matters is who internally have they, in the post-mortem of the Deshaun Watson stuff, is gonna get the blame for how the season went for Deshaun and the record when Deshaun was out there. Like, is that something where Jimmy's like, hey, I wanted y'all to play him, this is what happened, is what it is? Because then you might get a pass for all of this, right? Especially if you end the season out and you win like 3 games with Jameis, 4 games with Jameis, you demonstrate the offense was much better. Like, you can make a clear argument there. If this is like something where Kevin wanted to keep putting Watson in, then you're gonna have to win them 4 games, brother. Like, you gonna have to do, like, it's gonna have to be what it is, right? Like, so I think there is so, like, the one thing I don't want to make the impression of is that this is simple.
No,
you are allowed to have.
It's money.
Yeah, the waters are muddy, man. Yeah, if you're a Browns fan, you are allowed to have a complicated relationship and feeling about what the Browns are going to do here, right? This is not simple as in, oh, if they fire him, they're incompetent. No, that's not the case, because there's a very good argument to fire him, even though he's a 2-time coach of the year. And this is not a case to where if the Browns keep him, they're being negligent, because there's a very good argument to keep him based on how this season unfolded and the reasons this season unfolded. Look, this was a whole 45-minute conversation. Ain't shit about this. Simple, G. Like, that's just what it is.
And I think we was going around in circles and doing all kind of stuff.
Yeah. So many people want to boil this down to it being simple. I think that's the one thing that I've come to realize on this whole thing. This ain't going to be simple. There's no simple answer to this. How you move forward after Deshaun Watson, there's no simple answer from this. I think it's pretty, like, and this is maybe a conversation for next time, but if I'm the Browns, I'm thinking, hey, man, you got to make it clear to the fan base that you about to move on. Right? Like, I think you got to make that clear, because if you go out here trying to roll out QB1 number 4 again, like, that's not going to roll with people, man. Like, people ain't trying to see that no more.
I think they was letting them cool off a little bit because people was hot.
Yeah.
People was hot in the fan base for about
you look, even month. If you play Deshaun Watson again, which might happen, you got to let people, like, people have to have a concrete understanding that this is short term, right? If you draft somebody like the first 2-3 rounds, it's gonna be okay. This is short term.
I mean, but come on, man! Like, you can't see Jameis Winston put up numbers like that and then be like, you just you going back to you can't do that. No.
I'm with you, G. I am with you, G. I'm just saying Jameis Winston being retained is not enough to make people believe that you're moving on from this whole thing.
But
right?
I will say this: they may want to make it explicitly clear that due to this bag of money we owe him and the cap, the way things work, the way my checking and savings work this week, Deshaun Watson gonna be on this roster. Now we didn't say he playing, but we
might play some games and make him on PUP or something like that for a very long time, or like try to keep him on IR or something. But like, you got like, if I were the Browns, I would make it very clear on what you're about to do. In the way, like, you can't just come out and straight up say Deshaun work here, but he don't work here no more, right? Like, I don't think the league, like that.
I don't think the league would like that.
The NFLPA would definitely sue you. No. So you can't go out there and do something like that. But what you can do, and what you should do, in my opinion, I think this is a justified football move too. Hey, if you don't like any of these quarterbacks in the first round, it's fine. But there's plenty of quarterbacks in this draft that you would feel fine with taking in the second and third round.
Yeah, projects.
Like projects out there. Like for me, I'm like, we'll get into the quarterback talk. We're going to have G. Bush all, man. We going to say that one. We're going to say that one, man. We're going to say that one.
Y'all been waiting for that
going on that. That's going to be another 2-hour conversation or something like that. And, I'm trying to put this up before game day. So, y'all, G, appreciate you being on. Always good to get back in touch with you, man.
Always, man.
Make sure y'all check out the many projects that G. Bush has. And we now know what the driving force behind all of this is, right? They say behind a great man is always an even better woman. And I get your woman out here making sure that you get this thing done, right? You get all these jobs handled. Bills have to be paid.
Don't marry an accountant.
Hey.
Literally, like we be having real conversations.
It's about to be tax time too, boy. You about to be in that kitchen, just looking over the papers, keep all the receipts. But appreciate G for coming on, man. Make sure y'all check out G. And if you're watching this on Thursday, go ahead, check out. Me and G gonna be back at it on Friday, reacting to this game and whatever happens. So who knows? Hopefully we have a good show.
Hopefully it's gonna be a good show.
I want the good vibes back, man. Please, Browns, make the vibes good, dog. Throw some touchdowns.
Thanksgiving coming.
You know how immaculate the vibe would be if this Browns team beat Pittsburgh on national TV after Pittsburgh to beat the Ravens. Like, oh yeah, dog.
Jameis Winston and be out here preaching.
Hey, it'd be like that 1 year Jim Harbaugh snuck one off on Ohio State. What year was that? Was that like 2021 where it was like they weren't even that good no more?
Listen, I'm like, bro, they let these do it. Wasn't the man? Now I'm trying to think about it. What was the year they lost? CJ Stroud them lost to Michigan.
What was the year that Jim Harbaugh was it was after the pandemic, right? Where Jim Harbaugh was this close to being fired, right? Because they stuck during the pandemic, and then they was all right the year after.
Yeah, they caught CJ Stroud and them slipping. Then they came back to the horseshoe and beat them. When Donovan, what's his name? What's his name? I'm gonna call him Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Edwards ran around on him, and then they beat him again in the Big House last year. Oh, these dudes, man.
Hey, look, beating the Steelers. If you Kevin, you beat the Steelers 2 times. That's all you got to do.
If he beat the Ravens
in
twice,
Pittsburgh, that's it. Like if that cost Pittsburgh the division too. Oh yeah, we good.
Yeah. We'll take.
We good.
We'll play spoilers.
Good, bro. You can lose to the Dolphins.
Yeah, who cares about the Broncos? You got. Who care about the Broncos?
Yeah, you can lose to the Dolphins, dog, or the Broncos. We ain't gonna be that hot about that.
Tripping on that.
Yeah, you do that, and then you like eliminate the Bengals from the playoffs. Like if you get those 3. Hey, man.
Them division wins be counted as like
you
5.
All good with me.
Hey, look, we retooled. We signed Jameis to a couple little Minimowski veteran deal and see if we can sell ourselves for Travis Hunter, which we won't be able to get. But
I don't know. But Yeah. That was 2022 when they walked in, one
Yeah,
loss versus Michigan State, and they just came in, swooped in, beat Ohio State.
I don't even understand it. I don't.
Hey,
They had a
at Ohio
Olave.
State too.
They had Garrett Wilson. They had a Olave that year. They had Jackson Smith and Jigba that year, and they just lost.
And then they got smacked by Georgia in the playoff.
Yeah,
But yeah, look, these wins matter. And the fact that you play on national TV, that matters too, right? But G, appreciate you for coming on here, man. Appreciate everybody for watching. Hope y'all got I hope these last 50 or so minutes made your day suck just a little bit less. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Just a little bit better. If it did that, then I'm doing my job here. Me and G Bush doing our thing. But y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.
Peace.